Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I'm going to have a little bit of an interesting video to talk about. Now on the surface, this latest bit of news is a reaction to one of my videos. However, there is going to be a little bit more to that we are of course going to be covering in detail. But first, allow me to provide some backstory. The channel in question is actually an individual that I've covered before, although back then they went by a different name. However, they are now known as ICravetheVoid, whose latest video, Sarah is Mad, is about me, and my video titled Why People Hate Santa Inc., as he has decided to give me the nickname of Sarah, seemingly because he thinks that I would be offended by getting called Sarah. And there is an element that I personally find rather curious about that, because CravetheVoid has openly admitted to having an anti-Semitic past, even claiming to be a former Nazi. So I find it very interesting that in his attempt to try to insult me, he decided to give me a Hebrew nickname, which means noblewoman or princess. Now, I personally don't mind if I get associated with Judaism or not, but I do find it telling that he believes that this association is somehow insulting. It's almost as if CravetheVoid, an individual who self-admittedly has a history of anti-Semitism, thinks that other people would be offended if he called them a Jew. But let's now move on to the two arguments that he actually makes in reaction to my video. The first and main argument that he makes is that the show is simply following what he calls a boys club cliche, and thus he claims that the show is therefore not political. You know, the Santa Inc. show that is written by Far Leftists that believe that everything is political and propaganda.
It's the scrappy young up-and-comer. She wants to be the next Santa. It's the boys club thing all over again. I've said this many times. It's just the boys club cliche.
No, I would rather watch an R-rated animated Christmas comedy with a touch of a feminist agenda.
I have just the thing. When I was a kid,
Boys club thing all over again.
Christmas comedy with a touch of a feminist agenda.
So yes, the very creators of the show have completely and utterly proven CravetheVoid's argument incorrect. But let's now move on to the second argument, which has two parts to it, and is going to need a little bit of context. And the argument being that he gets triggered when I mention the phrase judiarchy, which is a word coined by yours truly, and is specifically referencing the conspiracy theory pushed by National Socialists that the world is secretly run by a specific group of people, the same exact way that feminists also push a conspiracy theory that the world is run by a group of people. Although in the case of the feminists, it is the patriarchy. So obviously the main point behind creating this term was to demonstrate the connection between National Socialism and social justice. And that he also gets triggered when I start comparing social justice to National Socialism. But let's look at the judiarchy portion of that discussion first.
By the way, I actually looked this word up. It doesn't mean Jews. It means judiciary. It's a made-up word. It means the judiciary. Although him thinking it means the Jews does bring his fucking tantrum in my comment section into a bit more focus. He doesn't know what this word means, apparently.
So as you can tell, he tried to look up a word that I specifically coined, and somehow managed to get it confused with a completely different word, namely judiciary, which is the court system. This is the point, however, where I get to provide some context. See, the reason he decided to have a look at the meaning of the word was because I decided to bring it up during one of our discussions in the comments, and his reading comprehension proved so poor that he legitimately thought I was saying patriarchy, and thus he would respond by arguing that yes, the world really is run by a judiarchy. Now, he did later try to make the excuse that he thought I said judiciary, which is quite amusing because by that logic, he was by his own reasoning willfully making the argument that the world is secretly being run by a cabal of judges who are universally conspiring with one another to maintain power over the entire world. As you could probably tell, this excuse that he makes is complete and utter nonsense, and makes him look even crazier. And very clearly, this was done specifically so he did not have to admit that he could not read my comment well enough to realize that I was not saying patriarchy. But now that we've finally moved on from the first half of his second argument, let's now talk about how he gets triggered by me comparing social justice to National Socialism.
He's well known for social justice. Yeah, he is that fucking stupid. Yes, I do want to end my life after hearing him talk. No, I'm not gonna, because then he wins. Fuck him.
So as you can tell, he is legitimately confused as to why I would compare social justice to National Socialism. Because while it is true that the National Socialists tried to apply socialist principles along racial lines, blamed all of the problems in the world on a single identity, believed that the DNA of those of that identity was a literal abomination, all while key leaders of National Socialism were making the argument that their ideology is one of social justice, but it is still somehow a big mystery to ICravetheVoid why I would ever consider comparing social justice to National Socialism. Oh wait, I believe I have just provided an answer as to why I would make that comparison. So I believe that provides answers to ICravetheVoid's comments regarding the video itself. But let's now move on to what appears to be the reason behind ICravetheVoid's reaction video in the first place, and that being that he has become rather butthurt thanks to a discussion that we have been having back and forth in the comments to one of his videos, something that he actually spends a fair amount of time referencing in the reaction video itself. The conversation itself is admittedly quite lengthy, and arguments are repeated numerous times within it. But allow me to provide some of the highlights, which include ICravetheVoid's argument that according to the Britannica definition of censorship, modding video games is somehow censorship. This is actually a reference to some previous reaction videos that he has made, where I provided a word-by-word reading of the Britannica definition of censorship, deemed subversive of the common good. It occurs.
Okay, how was this proved subversive of the common good? But listen to this. Popped off to double check. This guy uses mods for his games. By his own argument, he is censoring every game he's ever played by using mods.
Deemed subversive of the common good.
By his own argument, he is censoring every game he's ever played by using mods.
So as you can see, according to ICravetheVoid's understanding of the Britannica definition of censorship, every single video game mod ever made was apparently specifically created to remove obscene content from the original video game. As you could probably tell, this is yet another example of ICravetheVoid making an absurd claim, specifically because of his cripplingly poor reading and comprehension skills. Another highlight is of course the back and forth where I provide the definition of socialism and explain how fascism does in fact fit the definition of socialism, because under fascism the economy is controlled by the state, meaning that the means of production are socially controlled. Now ICravetheVoid did try to repeatedly counter by arguing that the state is not the community. Under fascism, however, the state is the community, because as the phrase goes, everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Therefore, the community must be within the state and not outside of it. And in addition, anyone who happens to be against the state will simply disappear. So only people who actively support the state are allowed to exist under fascism. And for this reason, fascism does fit the definition of socialism. But let's move on to the topic that ICravetheVoid is clearly the most butthurt about. That being that I keep pointing out the fact that he has actively tried to defend rape. This is, for those who don't know, specifically in reference to the Simon Wheeler comment. Simon Wheeler being a far-left activist who was part of the harassment campaign against August Ames, an adult actress who tragically took her own life shortly after this harassment campaign began. And the motive for this harassment campaign was that August Ames asked that the individual that she was expected to do an adult scene with, who had a history of doing gay scenes, be tested first, and when this individual was not tested, she refused consent. And this refusal of consent resulted in far-left activists labeling her as a bigot, and thus they began to actively harass her. So in other words, this situation proves beyond all doubt that you can be harassed by the far left simply because they do not like your reason for refusing consent. But let's now tie this back to ICravetheVoid, who has decided to downplay Simon Wheeler's comments and actions, which he tries to do via the age-old excuse that socialists always provide, that being it wasn't real pro-rape advocacy, because real pro-rape advocacy has never been tried. Now, of course, this is already pretty atrocious on the part of ICravetheVoid. However, things managed to get worse, as ICravetheVoid pretty much openly admitted that he supported the idea of August Ames facing repercussions because she refused consent, stating that people that he believes are bigots, and he does believe August Ames to be a bigot, should, quote, be shamed to let them know it's not tolerated socially. In other words, this is ICravetheVoid admitting that he believes August Ames should have faced repercussions over her refusal of consent. And since that moment, the debate transformed from questioning whether or not ICravetheVoid actually supports rape to debating just how much ICravetheVoid supports rape, with me pointing out the example of him downplaying the Simon Wheeler comments as proof that he is effectively downplaying a harassment campaign in this situation, and ICravetheVoid making the case that he doesn't support rape that much, and merely wants her to be, quote, not tolerated socially for her actions of refusing consent. Now, as you could probably tell, I'm not exactly a huge fan of ICravetheVoid, which is why I have given him a nickname also. Specifically, I call him Rape Lover, although admittedly I have to spell the first word of that phrase backwards to avoid the Eye of Sauron that is YouTube censorship. But nevertheless, I am sure you'll agree that Rape Lover is a perfectly appropriate nickname for ICravetheVoid. And I'm sure you're also now beginning to see why this particular individual has become rather salty about the whole situation. Now, of course, for those who are curious, I will be leaving links in the description below so you can check all of this out for yourselves. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.